I blow out the candle, a heart blown out of my chest. The wax burns like a body burning in the furnace. The wax is skinned to its muscle, reduces into unnamed organs, engorged and swinging on the wick like a tumor, left out to die on the heart strip. There were bronchial secretions in the clouds which hung open like a mouth. Your red saliva wanders in the sky. You are moving already past your body, into the head turns toward a light source. Hands and feet swell to sky size and walk there, touch lights. The northern lights soothe your broken lips like a sponge. Lights waver in the sky like teeth and broken cheek skin. The lights return to Earth after missing the body. Now the glow from the ear is red and blinking. The ear waits outside the face, pause before the tunnel of the brain. Sound waits for the brain. It registers at the brain's entrance, nervous tissue which grows up from the neck like a balled flower. Pixels swell in the brain stem. There are black holes that stop language. We are just like our stories. We go into a wide abyss. The dream is not another reality, but the crack where two realities leak towards each other. Like water coming in, the dream probes at my house, biting and stinging. I dreamed the opening before I saw it on you. The glitch absorbs what is behind your face. Your death mouth open like a cave, dead eyes prostrate in the double kingdom of seeing. Pity your wrong eyes stuck open while you sleep. The voice of a loon is calling from the mouths downstairs, a loon trapped in my only mouth. We gurgle at each other like two loons, unable to swallow our static. The loon bathes in a turbulent pond, the hospice bed, the upper airway. Dying is like anything else, yellow and blue lacerations on the brain. Now porous flames crawl to the edge of the dream, their blue shoulders bending, nervously reaching to climb into reality and plummet off, articulating to regard history like a tongue. The unimaginable wind stains the tape, lesions on a blue and yellow brain. Now the fire relaxes, the unseeing eyes open. Air stirs over pooled secretions in the throat. Now there is a blue thread in the middle of the flame, being pulled out of the flame. The wick is a red blinking star. I'm seeing its already dead light, a star falling through time into my pupil. Now the fire is a tall person, standing and bending over. Okay, we can turn the lights back on. Don't clap, that's weird. Weird later. Okay, I'm gonna sit down for a bit. Um, okay, so that all being said, um, that being like the Northern Lights and dying and stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my work. I mean, my current work, but like not what I'm doing here at MCBA. Like very briefly, sort of only as it relates to what I'm doing here. Um, but I have a lot to say about the the other things that I'm doing. And so if anyone wants to talk about it, like you're welcome to afterwards if you want to hear more about it, because I'm really not going to get into it. But like very briefly, as Annika said, I think about like devotion and trans interdimensional embodiment and surgery. Um, Particularly like through the lens of this thing called the trocar, which is, if you know anything about medical terms, I didn't know about it before I like looked through my medical records. But the trocar is it's this like tube that holds open your abdomen during abdominal surgery so that the laparoscopic instruments can pass through. So it's a portal that opens what's inside to what's outside for like a prolonged period of time. And so that's sort of like my model for what I do with my practice. Um, and I'm thinking about how surgery is this like profound, open dream state, like being in love. But we don't remember it. We have no recollection of it. And so the only way that I have been able to like be in that place is working with my medical records and my operative notes. And so I'm doing this thing. I'm like working with the archive. I'm like working with my body's memories, and I'm working with text and I'm working with material, um, to like access that dream state that can't be accessed consciously. Um, this is a piece of mine called Fast Gut Interrupted Suture. I consider everything that I make a book, even though this does not look like a book. Um, you can see there's like text in the back. This, do you see my, yeah, this is this is text back here. This is cast metal. And all of my work is participatory. So I'm going to show you what this piece looks like when it's activated. Okay. So the way that that works, is uh, through these things called capacitive sensors, um, which are, I'm not going to go into the whole like mechanics behind it. But basically, it's like it's the same mechanics that make a touchscreen work on your phone. So they respond to the electricity in your touch. Um, and you can connect them to anything conductive. In this case, I use metal, which I typically use. This is cast metal. But you could also, attach them to like water. People use like fruit, um, because an electric charge will carry through you, through the object, and then to the sensors. And then the sensors are coded to create a certain reaction. So I think of like this moment when you're touching, um, when you touch something that should not make this sound and it makes the sound. I think of that like the participatory moment of turning the page in a book. Um, and it's this moment where like you are collaborating with the material and with like time in the same way that you do when you're reading a book. Um, I was going to show you another example, but I'm actually going to not, um, because it's my choice. And I don't think I have that much time. But if you want to talk more about it later, I would love to. This is another of my pieces, from the same show, which I'm not actually really going to talk about. I brought it in here because it's a sort of early moment when I was thinking about glitches, which are going to come back. But again, this is some of the stuff that I do. This piece also has an interactive moment, that changes the like projection that's on here. Um, Also through capacitive sensors. Um, so that being said, I have to stop saying that. Sorry. Um, uh, I came into this fellowship. I have a background in letterpress. Um, Before I was doing all this stuff with like cast metal and computer coding and whatever. So with this fellowship, I sort of like proposed to put these two things together, and to connect these capacitive sensors to letterpress type, which is metal and conductive. Because in this case, the metal type then becomes this sort of like prophetic tool, when you put it together with the sensors, where it allows the letters and the words to take on new articulations, new relationships. It like literally allows the letters to like make sounds to like speak for themselves. Um, and yeah, so my proposal was just to come in, work with metal type in this way and kind of like see what happened. And like see sort of like what language it creates, what like it uncovers in my own text. Because again, as I said at the beginning, my work is very material, but it like all begins in text. I'm like a poet more than I am anything else. Um, so that's where I came in, um, to do this work. And then right when I was kind of like gonna get going, starting to experiment with this, my dad died. And here's where here's where it gets depressing, I guess. Um, and that both like really threw off my timeline in terms of um like making work, and like being a person. But it also ended up like opening and clarifying what form this project with type and sensors was going to take, and sort of like what the type was going to be talking about. Um, so I'm gonna talk about some like depressing stuff for a bit, and then whatever clarify into what I'm working on. So my dad and I were not in contact for like the past 10 years for all of my adult life. Um, and what happened, he was sick and he deteriorated so fast that um, we did not regain contact before he died. Um, so I'm left with this like, and I mean, it's complicated. I hated him. There was a reason why we, didn't talk. Um, and but what's happened? Do you need to fix anything? Okay. So what's happened is I'm left with this sort of like gap in communication, this like gap in contact. Um, and this gap of knowing. Um, and two particular things happened in his like last weeks. And the first one was that this was sort of the only moment of sort of contact that we had. I called him on the phone, and then he decided to FaceTime, but he was not like conscious. Like he was there. He was like a baby. He like did not. He barely had speech. He like barely. I think he knew who I had been. I don't know if he knew that he was talking to me. Um, but what he recognized was the sound of the crows. Multiple times there was like the crows. It was around 5 p.m. The crows were mobbing outside my window, and I was like, "Dad, do you hear the crows?" And he was like, "Yes, the crow." He'd like snapped into like this consciousness, and he was like, "Yes, I hear the crows." And this happened like two or three times. And I know that crows have like a lot of like mythological and spiritual relationship with death. If anyone has the like crow hookup and wants to talk to me about that afterward, I would love that because I haven't done enough research into it. Um, but this was like it really like got to me, and so I started recording the crows every time they mobbed outside my house, and just like I mean, I have like hours of recording. I'm just like walking around the house, I'm like doing the dishes, and the crows are just there. Um, we'll come back to that. The second thing that happened was that I actually went to see him. He lived on the other side of the country. And I went to see him before he died while I was there, he didn't wake up. Um, but I was able to speak to him. I whatever. We don't have to go into the therapy of it all, but um, what happened was I actually brought the book with me, but I don't need to. I brought this book of Rilke with me, which was he had given to me when I was a teenager, or actually like I had stole from him when I was a teenager. Um, and I ended up just like sitting at his bedside for like 4 hours and reading the entire book out loud to him, cover to cover. Um, and this like really, I mean, weird, profound, like scary, esoteric, whatever thing happened where um I like felt him talking to me through Rilke, through me reading Rilke. And so there was like this like crazy like quadruple moment of like his voice was like coming through my voice, like through Rilke's words. Like he was telling me what it was like to die. He was like giving me, I don't know. It wasn't like a reconciliation or anything because that wasn't possible. But there was this moment of like something was like using the language, something was like using my voice to like communicate with me. Um, and that made me realize that like what needed to happen with this project, with the letterpress and these sensors, like using the letterpress to communicate, um, is that I'm going to be like setting, this is my, oh, I've I have way more time than that. So I might go a little over. Oh, okay, perfect. Um, where was I? Oh, so I'm gonna be like setting the poem that I read at the beginning. I might set some of Rilke's poems. I might be setting like there are like letters that he didn't send to me. There are email, things like I'm gonna be working with sort of our archive in the same way that I worked with my medical archive previously. And so that's sort of like the like basis, like that's what the words are gonna be. Um, And then around the same time that he died, just sort of like by coincidence, all of this like old videotape of me as a baby from the 90s was unearthed and digitized. Um, and all of it was shot by him. There's not like that much of it. There's maybe a couple of hours, but it was all shot by him. And so I have this like really precise other like moment of archive between the two of us. Um, and so I'm like putting these things together. I'm putting these like texts together and I'm putting these images from this video archive and these crow sounds. And the type will be activating the images and the sounds. Does that like, it's like a complicated process. Does that like make sense? And so what the type will be doing is like creating a new thing out of this like videotape archive and out of these sounds and like putting them together. Um, and hopefully like, I mean, I don't have any like goals for this. I'm not trying to like, I'm not sentimental in the way where I'm not trying to like reconcile with him. I'm not trying to like communicate with him per se. But I am trying to like, um, kind of find a new relation to not only to my dad, but to like loss and to death, sort of like as this thing that's material, and as this thing that's not like buried in the archive and we have to like unearth it, but that's like in the archive and the archive is like talking, like the archive is making noises and the archive is like telling us something. Um, and one of the ways that that is happening is through the glitch. So this is the end, and then we're gonna watch a little bit of glitches. Um, so one of um in this videotape, um, there are like there are all of these glitches, which happens with old videotape. A lot of it is from like moments where he was like fast forwarding and rewinding, and so it's this like moment where um like time is shifting. And I feel like the glitch for me is this like moment both when like the machine reveals its like mistake, where the machine reveals its humanity, um, and also where the machine like sickens. Um, and it's like the Northern Lights, which is what these are, which I saw. Also, I forgot to talk about that. I saw the Northern Lights on the way home from seeing my dad in hospice for the last time. We were like driving through New Hampshire and Vermont, and we saw the Northern Lights. This is like the dead of winter in December. Um, and that was another moment where I was like, there, his spirit is, or whatever. Um, and I feel like the glitch like does the same thing as like the Northern Lights do. It's this like moment where the veil in reality thins, this moment where the veil between like the dimensions of like life and death, the dimensions of like surgery and after surgery, the dimensions between like waking and sleeping thins. Um, so I'm thinking about like opening a glitch in the archive. Um, Now that's it. We're gonna listen to some crow noises and watch some glitches. I maybe turn off the lights again. Thank you. Um, there's like a little bit of flashing if anyone has issues with that. It's not major, but it's glitches, so it's like kind of like intense flickering, maybe we'll call it.
Thank you, Alter. Okay. All right. Next, our resident is Essence Enwere, who is a Black and queer interdisciplinary artist living and working on occupied Oketi Shah Cohen and Wapekut land, now known as Minneapolis, Minnesota. Their work fuses design, typography, artist publications, and printmaking to tell stories of Black history, genealogy, and ecology. Rooted in an engagement with land and ancestry, their practice explores how visual language can preserve memory, connect lineage, and honor cultural resilience. And where he creates work that bridges the poetic and archival, weaving together design traditions and book arts as forms of storytelling and collective remembrance. Perfect. Should we try that?
Thanks so much. Is this close enough? Yeah. Um, Hi, my name is Essence Enwere. Today, I've sort of titled this Soil and Sound, exploring the Black Sonic and ecologies through artist books, type, land, and music. There are themes that show up repetitively in my work. As Annika said, it's interdisciplinary and sort of complex. But it's been really fun to continue to research and dive into this every single day. Thank you. Thank you. Um, okay, there we go. I'm a book artist, printmaker, and type designer, but I do more. I think I would like to think of them as those are my three main hubs, and other works sort of flow in and out as needed or necessary for the stories I'm trying to tell, what I'm trying to emphasize. What's been coming up as of recently is a lot of photo work, and it's been a part of my work, but a lot more intentional photo collage, um, as well as things like animation and in 3D. And I'm never afraid to try something out to get the story across that I'm trying to make. I create artist books that speak to the Black American identity and history. Um, Specifically, why I choose that is because I lived in the Deep South for my formative years, and it really left an impact. But I use artist books as that vessel because in oral-based cultures across the diaspora, um, they get lost through time, and especially in our digital age, a lot of people say things like we're losing recipes, and this is my one way to continue to preserve and amplify, as well as like reimagine and uphold, archive, all at the same time. My work is based a lot in deep research, from reading novels to talking with family members, doing my own lineage research. A lot of it is a deep dive into Black Southern culture that typically gets underrepresented because it's rural, it's poor, and those sort of things are suppressed in our American culture. I'm starting off with a series of just my works to kind of ground us in what I've been doing. Um, some of these are a little bit more expanded, such as Juke Joint. It was my senior exhibition project like a year and a half ago. That's when I graduated from the U. It's a cultural slab serif typeface, and for anyone who's like normal and doesn't do typography, a slab serif typeface is a type that has those really thick serifs, big blocks at the tops and ends of the letters. It's a type typically really found heavily in the South, which is why I picked it. You see it a lot from church signs to juke joints to blues and jazz. And historically, you've even seen it on slave auction posters, and it's been reclaimed and through Black American history through time. And this is part of my reclamation story as well. Um, it This book is a manifesto, it's a typeface and photo collage all combined into one artist book. It focuses on ecomusicology, which is sort of the combination of music, land, and semiotics, which is symbols and how that affects culture. I love to explore the relationship between Black music, environment, and culture. I think you can't talk about Black American identity without talking about relation to land, how we cultivated and built America at its very beginnings. It also traces spirituals, things like the Delta blues and gospel emerge from this entanglement of landscape, labor, and lived experience. I had a really lovely time doing a lot of deep dive research on the different ways that we've reclaimed this typeface over time, but as well as like putting my own modern spin on it. I show the full typeface because I'm doing updates for this project and beyond. I've added alternates for my O and my Q, one that represents a little bit more of traditional type and sort of shackles and chains to offer against that modernity. I'm turning this typeface into wood type to honor its sort of origins, so I can print with it as well and do deeper dives in physical books with this type and let it live truly in the world it emerged from. I kind of made this new O and Q to talk about the shackles and the weights of the land and the labor, um, to be used in more unique ways and in combination with the original, to keep expanding and telling a joint story. Um, and so you can kind of see the comparisons. It's just different. I wouldn't say better or worse. I'll admit this one for you. I wouldn't say it's better or worse, just different and adds a different level of storytelling. Some of these other books I'm going to kind of run through a little bit faster, but they're equally as important. But Juke Joint specifically, I think, is the catalyst for where my work has evolved into and continuing to play in these similar themes. A Surrealist Spring is a CMYK screen printed book, about 3.5 inches tall. So if you know screen printing, that was hell on earth. But um, it was really beautiful. I love exploring Black surrealism and using fruit and photography in really fun ways. I like to say I'm a photographer with a lowercase p. I don't use it, I would say, as its like primary way. I do a lot of distorting and editing and collaging for my narratives and my stories, but it's a deep part of my practice. I'm a shutterbug and always taking photos of sort of the land and earth and combining that with archive to continue to tell and reimagine Black stories. Numenon, which I have Andy in the room with me, is a collaborative research book we did together in class. I got to talk about my book, Manumission, and do risograph. I think this was like one of my second times ever doing it. I had a really long night in the press, but it was really fun to again use photo collage and pulling things from the archives and my own illustrations to talk about Black identity and talking about police brutality and the love and labor and the cycle of oppression and resistance that Black Americans and Black people across the diaspora experience every day. And I love to talk about this cycle of sort of forced labor and coming back to land as we built it up, and now we're excluded from it. So it's why ecology is such a big part of my practice. Jabal Tariq is a sort of laser cut artist book. It's about a typeface, inspired by Black Moors in Spain. I used a lot of research and talked with a historian at UMIS actually about this project to sort of get her perspective and understanding of how Black Moors sort of operated in Spain and pulled a lot of the musical elements. Again, a big part of my work, pulling in sort of those musical elements, trumpet flared, serifs, just to talk about Blackness and music and culture and how I think it's always intertwined across the diaspora and connects us all to resistance. Midway is a photo and poetry newsprint zine. I took all of these photos on a trip to Chicago from Minneapolis. I use Midway, it's a big term here from the midpoint between Minneapolis and St. Paul, but also just like talking about the midway of being in between life. And you kind of get this smaller America, simpler times, the smaller natural moments between big bustling cities to kind of sit in the mundanity of life. And I thought that was really beautiful. All I got to do was stare out and look at small farms and cows and reflect and get harassed by small Amish children on the train, um, which they offered a lot of great perspective, and had a lot to say about my camera. And I just got to sit with the simplicity and again cultivating that land and speaking to no longer belonging in place and being rejected um, from land. I think a lot of people don't associate blackness with being outside, and things like hiking and nature almost feel foreign now due to force, despite most of our historic in history we were outside and doing forced manual labor for this earth and for this country. And so I explore those themes over and over again to battle with my own identity and to also celebrate it and uplift that resistance and work. I'm coming to see you sort of relates to this as well. It comes from the term 40 acres and a mule, and I can't connect to my ancestors because I don't know them. Most Black Americans don't. We were sort of stripped of everything, knowing your ancestors, knowing any relatives. We don't have papers, places where we come from in Africa, but I know I come from Mississippi. And so when I go down south, I think I'm coming to see you. And that's the small moments I can be in the field with my shoes off on the dirt and running. I'm not religious, but I know my ancestors are in the trees and in the rain and the grass because matter never dies. And so I know they're always with me in that way. This was like a unique book form for me with this like gold screen printed belly bands, this like unfolding story through time. We go back and forth between present and past. Just to talk about, again, losing connection, never getting what is owed, but continuing to find and speak to my ancestors regardless, because I deserve that and I deserve to feel grounded. Black Soil erupted from a solo show I had about a year and a half ago. It's a photo and poetry zine that has a lot of this like black and white photography, and this is also another turning point where you can see my work sort of continue distorting a lot of my photography. I spend a lot of time in woods and fields and trees, early mornings and late nights, sort of capturing, I would say, the rawness of nature, unmanicured, and really pushing the boundaries of contrast and using that to continue to tell Black stories. Black Soil was speaking about, again, finding my ancestors and things like the rain, the grass and the blades, because that's where I hear the most, in that quiet, in that space. Shining Revelry, I would say, is another huge turning point, along with Juke Joint, where I start using, I would say, a lot more traditional artist book forms, where I'm breaking it out of sort of the traditional book realm and really using artist books to push myself and be more sculptural. This was an altar book set. I used gold leaf for the first time, reso work, and a lot of my own photography and digging through archives. Shining Revelry is about the celebration of ancestry, the celebration of resilience. In the piece, the ancestor is wearing a large headpiece, but I'm adorning it in yellow and gold because that, again, it talks about adoring the resistance. I wouldn't be here if people didn't resist and find love and love each other over and over and choose to live for a better day. And I love honoring that. I think a lot of people feel shame in being relatives of slaves. And for me, I think it's really beautiful that despite being whipped and tortured and hung, that people decided to love each other regardless and continue fortifying on. And I think they deserve to be celebrated and honored, especially in the ways that they turning those pain into adornment and really using this as an age of celebrating the Black body and what it's been through. This is just showing that I've started to break out of the book form. This can be done vertically. I showed it in the show at PF in more of traditional, showing those peaks and valleys, but this book is meant to talk about transversing of time. I'm using this natural sort of collage elements again, graphic, photography, all the weeds at the bottom are my photography. When I went down to Georgia to sort of get crops and field pictures, I love just telling that story through pointed choices of my own photography. And now the question is like, how is my work continuing to evolve? I'm using the collage, and I would say before I had sort of a unsettled feeling about how to describe my work, and so I'm sitting in the beauty of photo collage and pulling from the archives and mixing that with my own photography to continue to talk about reimagining and to continue to talk about seeing my ancestors in places where faces don't always show up. I'm turning into these large form screen prints. I'm turning them into artist books, just to hold that power. And I love the materiality of being a printmaker and a book artist. You can tell stories with the paper you pick, how you go about printing, the binding choice. And I think that's why I've kind of fallen in love with artist books over the past 3 years, to continue to help fortify and create long lasting moments and reimaginings of Black culture all at once with the archive. And now I kind of want to get into like what's in store for this upcoming exhibition in this residency. What I've been exploring is a 3-act structure, talking about land, music, earth, and Black history, and really exploring the archives in depth. I'm using things like gospel music, dancing, and the blues, especially, to talk about the weight and history through time. So I'm doing water in the blues, emphasizing things like cowrie shells, our time on the slave ships, and how the water is sort of reflective of the blues in terms of repetition and the tides, and how it's always moving and coming back in slow rhythms, and how some people, some ancestors chose to die there, in their own empowerment instead of enslavement, and talking about how, again, that active choice and repetitive nature and giving into the water, and how that reflects in the blues over and over. Act two is talking about the ground and gospel. And there's a sort of dual aspect of Christianity within the Black community. In a way, it saved a lot of people and gave many people hope to keep going, but at the same time, it wasn't their choice. And they were stripped of things like voodoo from Africa and home religions. And so I think there's that duality, which is kind of why I want to make a dose book, which is kind of historically used in biblical times and for Bibles, but also books that are church fans, and use quick press and gold leaf to talk about just Black culture and being involved in that land and that earth, and how it's continued to fan and evolve over time, and our relation to that over time has grown and changed as well. Lastly, I'm talking about the fire and juking and jiving. I'm doing things like flag books, which sort of I'm able to compare things like old swing and juke joint to modern day majorette, and talking about movement as a form of resistance, I would say, alongside music. Blackness uses the heat and sweat of our bodies to connect to one another and continue to be like Phoenix from the ashes. These small juke joints, which are sort of community places of music and dance and gambling and drinking, to sort of pass away the hardships of oppression, are sort of those great meeting places to reset and find hope again. And so I'm using fire to talk about reigniting oneself and to keep living on. I want to do things like a tunnel book so you can look into the juke joint and keep expanding this sort of idea of a collective meeting place inside of artist books. I think artist books can be material, they can be held, they can be interactive, and they're reflective, and I didn't even really use my notes, but they have a framework that allows you to um, be multifaceted, which is what I think Black culture reflects. So that's my artist talk. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And finally, we will hear from Genie Hien Tran, who is an interdisciplinary artist, who was born in Ho Chi Minh City and grew up there before migrating to the US at 16. Her work is informed by diasporic memory and the exploration of identity through the use of collage, poetry, design, and textiles. In their work, Tran layers elements of contemporary cultures with historical learnings and artifacts in order to capture the beauty and nuances of home, loss, and belonging.
Thank you, y'all. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Annika. Um, okay. I yeah, I'm excited to be here and thank you so much for being here and listening to us and spending some time to listen to all the artists here. I think it's really special to build community in this space together. And so I just want to state that. I also want to start us off with a poem that I wrote for my dad during the pandemic, which I often start with during most of my artist talks. So if you've been to one of mine before, you've heard this one. But I think it sets the energy for my work pretty well. Um, so here it goes. When this is all over, my father will be beautiful again. He will wear the sun like a hat. Shadow drapes over the cucumber vine. When he reaches out, his hand can almost shape the American dream. Golden sky, smoked coffee, thin black hairs, reunion. He is singing a new country into existence through the palm of his hand. Okay, so my name is Jung Fang Minh Hing or Genie Hien Tran. Okay. So I've been in the US now for over 10 years. I was thinking the other day, I think almost 12, 13 years, which is crazy to me. I feel like once I hit that like 17th year living here, that's more than when I lived in Vietnam. I would go kind of crazy. Um, but anyway, so I'm a multidisciplinary artist who focuses a lot on collage, print, poetry, installation work. My work often takes on the theme of home, belonging, memory, and immigrant identity. I like to think of my work as a research and process based, which means I often start any projects with a bunch of materials from images to objects to readings. And then I pin a lot of these stuffs on the wall and then observe them until something clicks in me. And then the work emerges after that. So through the process of editing and deconstructing and assembling things back together, I find the spaces where my multiplicities can exist. And I can go into details later what that all means. But okay. Okay, before going into all that, I want to look at this work, which is my very first installation collage work. I've been trained as a graphic designer and illustrator before, so this was my first like foray into doing that it was outside my comfort zone. But this work opens a lot of ways of seeing for me and changes my practice entirely. So this piece I created in 2021, my first year in grad school. It has this 28 by 32-inch silk replica of my parents' wedding photo that is hung above this 6 by 8 foot collage compiling a bunch of their images, stories, and my memories of them. I spent many years in the US trying to belong and trying to feel as American as possible, whatever that means. And at this point in time, I didn't really know who I was. So I think I was really struggling with like self-identity and what I'm meant to do or be. So I thought that a good way to get to know myself again is learning about the people that brought me into this world. So I wanted to look at my parents' stories and examining, their relationship to each other, their relationship to me, and so I can learn what is my relationship to home. Um, so through the process of making this work, some of the questions that I was pondering with is like, who are their friends? Like, who are my parents as human beings? Um, like what did they like to do? What were they scared of? And what were they dreaming about? Did they also like to go on walks? I conducted like interviews with my dad. I gathered images from him. So the works has a lot of uh, family photos and writings, and including my personal writing to them. also readings I was doing while making this piece and objects that belong to them that I've brought with me throughout the years. Um, so this piece laying on the table, as you were seeing earlier, kind of presents us like multiple windows of narrative. So there is, my intention was there is no beginning or ending. You can enter the piece at any point and exit at any point. And so the work kind of foregoes any like solid direction of how to experience it. And ultimately, I wanted to make this work to exhibit my love for my parents. Um, and then, yeah, so as I was saying, I'm trained as a graphic designer. It is very ingrained to me to love and follow the grid. But in my personal work, I often find different moments where I can break this like predetermined grids to be a bit messier, to be rough, and like to stop trying to make sense. In these my collage work, there's like this disorganized within like kind of a more formal organized system. And surfaces and textures are also really interesting to me. I love cutting and like pasting, peeling, rubbing these images off where like one image can kind of blend into the other. And I play with this a lot to like present the nuances of memories and reflections and merging kind of the two cultures together. Um, I also do a lot of paper making, starting at this point. It becomes a very important process for me. I love making paper, but it honestly, at the beginning, just started as a tool of recycling. I thought I was making so much waste by collaging. I felt like I was like killing the earth. So like there was just prints everywhere. And so I wanted to like use these prints and like make them into new sheets of paper. Um, and One of the reason why I also wanted to do that is because the prints usually have photos of my family on it. So even if I didn't choose that particular photo for the last project, it still have like, let's say my sister's face, and I just didn't want to toss that into the trash. And so, yeah, so I started just recycling stuff. I sourced a lot of old sketches, notes, love letters, dead house plants, even. So leftovers from other projects, like I was talking about, to make this new sheets of paper. So most of the time, my new sheet of handmade paper has remnants and marks of my previous project. And even when that really isn't visible and you wouldn't really know that, to me, I love the idea that all my work then just connected together and lives in the same world, and they are kind of in a way a multiplicity of themselves, and it makes my artistic process circular. Um, so yeah, I guess I view the process of paper making very similar as well to how I view my own self-identity, which is that making a new sheet of paper isn't like without evidences of the old material. Um, I think anyone who's tried to make a piece of paper know that like you always see the material. But I think now here, like the answer to my questions earlier that I was my existential crisis of like, who am I? Who should I be? Kind of end up being at this point very fluid, because just like making paper, I want to allow myself this chance to be like renewed, to adapt, to correct my mistake, and give myself the generosity to just exist as a person. Um, and so um, other things is my work relies a lot on repetition. The repeating images of like family photos, or in the next slide you see like rows of joss paper. I find repetition to be a really successful metaphor for memory. So even though I'm using the same images over and over again, like this piece on the right, maybe you can't see from far away, but it's just a hand, just a bunch of hands. That's my hands holding my dad's hands. But it's the same image using different treatments such as like paint or drawn over or peel off, or they're presented at different scales. And I wanted to do that to show that the same memory, due to time or distance or experiences, kind of fluctuate between coherent and clear to clouded, or like overly dramatized or just completely false. Um, so in my work, I often like ask the questions of like, can we really trust our memory and its image, or would repeating the same color and same pattern or same text 100 times over will reveal its truth? Here's the repetition of the Joss paper I was talking about. This piece is more recent. This has a lot of image transfer, embroidery. I try to be, at this point, I try to be a lot more selective and intentional with materials included. So like compared to the first collage that I made, this one is yeah, I feel like this one arrives at a spot where I feel like I understand my materials well. And with this work, I pasted my fortune teller's prophecy of who I was going to grow up to be all over in the back. So I'm not going to go into this too much, but my parents took me to a fortune teller as a baby. And so I have a full book of what's going to happen to me from like age 0 to whenever. I haven't looked at the end, so I don't know how far I make. So this is only the first page. But yeah, so these like 14 pages like on the background, and then I paste on top like images of my family, the hands of my family members holding each other. So here I'm like attempting to build my own identity by literally like reassembling my predetermined destiny or who I was supposed to be, and mixing that with images of people or events that I care for or miss. And my goal every time I show this work is that the bottom half of the Joss paper will be burned as an offering to my ancestors. And yeah, as a way to return back the love that they have held me. This is one of my favorite work I've made to date. Here I screen printed 365 pages of a newsprint of the day my mom passed away. I make a lot of work about grief in general and about my mom specifically. And to me, it is the only way she can continue to exist, as long as I keep talking and grieving her. So this like tearaway calendar was created kind of like a manifestation of my love for her. And I also wanted to share this love and grief with other people as well. And so people who came into the gallery can take a piece of the calendar as a keepsake. On a personal level, by doing this, I hope the audience can have a moment to think about their mother or someone they love so much that existence sometimes seems impossible without them. And so, as you might have noticed throughout, a lot of my work utilizes language, poetry, signage, sometimes as a companion and sometimes as an anchor for the work. The text is often sourced from letters people have given me, text messages, Google images of street signs or advertisements, poems I've read or written that speaks to the work, or in the case of the right-hand side here, official documents. This is a print of the peace agreement between the United States and Vietnam to end the American War in 1975. When I was showing this print, I put it next to a work of mine that was filled with my visa headshots, just to give additional context for that work. But overall, I've always just really liked the relationship between image and text together to create a visual poetic that doesn't necessarily like dictate what the audience should think or feel, but rather as a whole encompassing composition. To me, if the image is the eye, then language is an organ. So I come from people who teach languages. My mother tongue is Vietnamese, but I started learning English since I was 6. My mom was an English teacher. My grandma was a French teacher. So languages have always been very integral to our upbringing. The languages they taught, though, belong to countries that colonized us, that brought us a lot of violence. Yet also the languages, these very specific languages give us a lot of power. So knowing how to speak English or French means that you will be guaranteed a better jobs in Vietnam, better opportunities, so just inherently more power in society. I would have also never been able to sit here and reflect on these thoughts if I didn't know English at all. So in some way, to me, it's both like a flower and a knife. Um, but not until the past 3 years that I got to speak Vietnamese more frequently on a day-to-day basis. This is because my sister decided to move closer to me, which thank God. Um, so yeah, because I feel like I was losing my Vietnamese speaking skills. And those of you who speak multiple languages probably know that if you don't practice one for a little bit, it takes a lot of time for it to come back to you. And it hurts a lot when it's your native tongue. So speaking Vietnamese again, like frequently, makes me realize something else, that like each of the language brings out a version of myself that isn't quite the same in the other. And sometimes I struggle to know which one is more authentically me. Like, am I more myself in your language or mine? Am I capable of expressing my truest feelings in my own language? And do I know how to do that? Um, so yeah. And just a little bit, I guess, into the history of the Vietnamese language. Like, even the current Vietnamese writing system is a product of imperialism. Before the arrival of the Portuguese and the French, we used a writing system called chữ nôm, which is the one on the left here. Um, Similar Chinese-esque letters with additional sounds and words that belong to the Vietnamese language. But in the late 19th century, our alphabet was updated to use the Latin one version instead by the French missionaries in order to easily spread Christianity and evangelical ideologies. So since then, chữ nôm has significantly diminished, and chữ quốc ngữ, the Latin version, is now the official system of writing in the nation. And so this is what I'm interested in exploring for my Jerome project, is the multiplicities of identity through translation and illegibility. And the task of translation and moving between languages is one that comes with a lot of distortion and ambiguity. I'm investigating these languages and words that are both familiar and foreign to me. By weaving them together, populating them through repetition, stringing them in places where they don't belong, or become so illegible that me and my words are unrecognizable to the authoritative power that forces these languages upon my people. However, because of these languages, I am able to be here, build community, and cultivate relationships that otherwise would have been impossible. So my exploration is situated in this nuanced and complicated third space with both a lot of care and a lot of hesitation. An artist that I think does this exceptionally well is Teresa Hakuncha, especially in her book Dictee. Have anyone here read Dictee? Yeah, hell yeah. It's phenomenal work. So Teresa Hakuncha used letters as both a literary and aesthetic tool. Dictee is a text-centering woman who suffered from patriarchal violence and colonial violence. She writes about cultural erasure and loss of languages using so many different styles of writing. So prose, poetry, letters, speeches, internal dialogue, stream of consciousness, various untranslated languages, French, Korean, English, Japanese, are all interspersed with like photographs, sketches, drawings, yada yada. And like all of this come together to provide the structure for rethinking system of power. In my research, I am also looking at Renee Green's beautiful space poem that are up right here. These are reversible 28 banners hung from the gallery ceiling with text inspired by Mae Swenson poem Color Without Object. She has made a lot of versions of these space poem for over the years, and this one really stuck with me because they look like a sea of endless conversations. She is exceptional at using color as a categorization device and words as building blocks. This work presents countless opportunities for rereading and misreading, which I love, with consideration for how color and language play with one another to expand this spatial dialogue. Above all, during my research for this work, I think of my father now living in America, barely speaking any English. At 63, he is looking at these words and letters we see every day like they are an amputated alphabet. He knows the letters and he sees the words, but he doesn't understand them. And these words don't see the world the way he does. I'm also thinking of how our city has been within the past few months under the occupation, how it was an urgency for many of us who don't know Spanish to catch up really quickly. And like many other, Google's Translate was my number one search. The tool helps a lot immensely, but there was still a lot of misconnection. And at the end of the day, my examination of translation as a tool is just a representation of my desire to connect to people, to understand and to be understood, to care and be cared for, and to build community. Promise I only have like a little bit left. So besides coming from a lineage of language teachers, I also come from a line of poets and freedom fighters. At 13, my dad signed a letter with his blood to fight in the Cambodian War. So you can see where I get my drama from. My grandfather also fought during the American War and was imprisoned countless of times. During his times in prison, he would write my grandma these poems that are up here about his love for her, but also his love for an independent nation. There is a book printed in Vietnamese with most of his writing. For my Jerome project, I would like to start with translating either this or some other poem of his to English and consider how I can fill in the gaps left by translation limitation with images, objects, or sounds, or perhaps even more words. So would my translation captures his feelings? And if not, how can I get there? In the limitation of language, I want to know if other options can emerge. How do I fill in these gaps in conversations that either I have forgotten or wasn't included? Do we need true understanding in order to connect to one another? So these are the questions I want to explore in the process. Perhaps not to get to any answers, but maybe just to accept them. So yeah, this body of work will include a lot of experimentation. I cannot tell you exactly yet what it will all look like, but there will be paper, that's for sure. This work above, like right here, is made out of paper clay. So I'm also excited to work with paper pulp again in this like dimensional form. As I talked about before, I'm interested in making work an object that includes the audience participatory and requires the audience to move themselves in a certain way to view the work. I'm gonna end my talk here with a quote from Ocean Vuong, my favorite poet. This is from his book On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. In Vietnamese, the word for missing someone and remembering them is the same. Nhớ. Sometimes when you ask me over the phone, con nhớ mẹ không? I flinch thinking you meant, do you remember me? I miss you more than I remember you. Thank you so much. And that's it for me.
Okay, we have some time for questions, comments. If you have anything to say, or if you are online, please put it on the in the chat.
Well, thank you all for sharing your work. I'm so grateful you exist in our community and you're making work here in Minnesota. I'm curious, is there anything after seeing each other's presentation, is there anything in each other's presentation that you were surprised to see that you're taking away from that maybe you didn't know about each other's practice that you're inspired by or that you want to carry forward?
I think I was surprised by like the overlap of themes, but in different capacities. Alternized use of archive, and then truly, and then Guinea and I's specific use of like design and type heavily within our work as well. Listening to it, I'm really excited to see how our work plays off of each other in the same space. That's what I thought about.
I mean, we had a funny little moment where you were like, "Has anyone read Dictee?" And then we were like, "Yeah." That's just that was like a very minor little moment, but that's like one of the most important books I think that has ever been written, but like personally to me, very important. And so it was like cool to see like, oh, we're actually kind of all thinking about like different things, but through similar veins and similar things, but through different veins. And um, we've had like we've had one critique together, um, which was a couple months ago. I don't know. It's not my business. Um, where we were sort of like talking about some of these ideas in much earlier stages. So for me, it was really cool to see how things have like clarified a lot in the past couple of months. I think for all three of us.
I don't really have anything else to add. I think it's always really fun to be in a community of artists and working together alongside each other. I think we're all exploring very similar themes. And I think it's always so fun to see people working with the same or similar narratives in different ways because there's just so many different ways you can approach a story. And that's kind of the beauty of art making.
I am too. It'll open in December, everyone, so come back then. Any other questions, comments, remarks, thoughts? Okay, I'll ask you guys one. What are you looking forward to most with your projects or like looking towards exhibition and how you like the audience and display and interaction? Yeah.
I'll start again. Yeah. For me personally, it feels like my most potent work. And like the true, it feels like it's a really big evolution of these similar thoughts that I've had. And I'm really using, I feel like the artist book in a lot more flexible ways that I haven't before that are getting a lot more sculptural and breaking the bounds a lot more. That's really exciting for me. Making bigger work, different work that continues to push um, my thoughts on artist books and how to tell a story and weave that all together.
Um, I feel like I don't know if excited is the right word, but like my work really like doesn't exist until it exists, and a lot of it is yeah, I think this project especially because it's like based in a sort of experimentation of like where like I'm not in control of the final result. Like the words are in control of the result. And it, and whatever weird like esoteric prophetic thing that I'm doing. So I'm like interested to see what happens. Like I don't know. I haven't started experimenting yet. And I think that like a lot is going to change both in terms of how I relate to like type, how I relate to these sensors, like how I relate to my practice materially, and then also, I mean, like how I relate to my dad and like all the things I was talking about. So yeah, Excited? I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult. But I am really like, I think I have so many questions about my work, that only the work is going to answer. So I'm looking forward to like being in it. Yeah.
The question was what we're excited about. I forgot already. Oh, looking forward to. Okay. Okay. I'm looking forward to, I guess, two things. Like I was saying, like I feel like I'm very much like a process-based artist, so I don't really know what my work is gonna look like until I start like sitting with it for a while. And that can be kind of nerve-wracking. But at this stage, I think at the stage of my research, I feel really excited about the direction that it's going. And so I'm just yeah, I just want to see what it wants to become. Um, and plus also I feel like I haven't been able to do a kind of like a larger scale installation work since grad school. So it'll be exciting for me to play around with space and kind of manipulation of audience viewing experience. And I think that part would, yeah, when during installation would come. But yeah, that's something I'm excited about.
Well, like while you were talking, I was thinking about how I like last year came off of a grad program at the U, and I adore my cohort. Some of them were here. I'm looking at one of them right now. But something that I'm really excited about is like something that I don't know, just coming off of like that program, which was made up of artists, but like not book artists, is like um how excited I am to be making this work like at MCBA and with the two of you, or not with you, but like in tandem with the two of you, and getting to show it also at MCBA, with like people coming and interacting with it who like are also book artists and who, because it's a very, you interact, I think, with book arts in a very different way. And for a long time, I've been used to like really trying to translate my work into this, like trying to tell people that it's a book. And people are like, what? It's not a book. And I'm like, it's a book. Whereas book artists see my work and they're like, yeah, it's a book. That's so cool. Um, and so I'm really excited to be like back in that place where people are like thinking about the materiality of text. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Walter. Thanks, guys.
Hey everyone. I am so happy to have learned so much about your practices. I have like the pleasure of knowing you each outside of here, but I learned so much from your presentations. That was really impactful. I wanted to ask you, because this is on my mind in terms of art in general, but like, how do you want to, or could you speak more to how you go about finding the connective points in your work? Because Alter and Genny, you both are working from really specific references to find the connective points that bring the audience in, from like shared experience and essence. I see you like working with the collective narrative and finding connection there. So I'm also just thinking about Dictate and how, I mean, I love that book, and it's also like such a not legible book, but it also becomes legible because it teaches you how to interpret. So just thinking about how you're going to move into books and the like didactic expectation of a book, but also like, yeah, do you just want to speak to the process of finding those points of connection?
But no, Sati, thank you. I feel like for my own work, yeah, I usually start from a very specific and personal connection. And at least to me, I feel like whenever I try to be universal, it doesn't land. And so I feel like the most universal thing that I can present is by being as personal and as specific as possible. And but like I was saying earlier, you know, when I make work about my mom, I don't want you to just think about my mom. I want you to think about your mom, perhaps. And so, you know, even in with this project, I'm taking specifically languages like Vietnamese, French, and English, but I think the aspect of having to translate and to become a different person or to try to explain yourself or be like the fear of not saying the right thing is pretty universal. I think even if you just speak the one language, and I think at the core of this, it's like about wanting to, at least for me, like the core of the work is wanting to connect to whoever it is that you're talking to, and if the communication is so difficult that visually it exists as this like illegible mess, then so be that. You know, at least that's how I think about it. And um, if you know a communication feels so overwhelming that it exists as like really large type on the wall that you have to take multiple steps back in order to view that, then that's how I want to create those kind of points of connection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Um, I like as you spoke, the collective, but I do start a lot of my own experiences. I think I'm one of the few African American people who can sort of trace their lineage at all, um, because we do have like a white ancestor in there who forcibly slept with one of his slaves, and he ran away. And so that is a part of my history that I sort of like keep myself rooted in. But I moved to the collective because I see my work as like an act of preservation. Um, Across the diaspora, we're so oral based, and I think because digital means and losing community through time, um, there aren't people keeping records of things that I deem important. And if I can be part of that voice who continues to uplift and represerve and give people access and different abilities to interact with our culture, whether you're in it or not, um, that means the world to me, as that it's a little piece that gets to continue living on. But I always try to wrap it back to me in some capacity, even if it feels maybe a little bit more impersonal. Because I lived in the deep rural Mississippi Delta. I lived in Texas, where I talk a lot about like things like Juneteenth and the freedom of the 19th that day. And um, how can I continue to tell my story amongst the broader experience so others are seen and validated in that too, and they can feel like their stories are also being preserved in that as well. That's what I like to think. And my connective tissue between the general themes, I think, was very confusing for me for a long time, or felt maybe amorphous. But as I continue to research and create work, I feel like I'm creating my own thesis through real time, and it feels more ironed in and hammered in as I continue to make work that explores that type and language and land and culture, and the big term of like semiotics of the Black identity. And I don't see a lot of people doing that, and I feel it's important work to at least add into.
Um, that's a good question, Sati. I feel like definitely I resonate with what Genny was talking about with like this specific and personal, like so specific and personal, then it like opens a window into collective. I think that's true conceptually for me too. But what immediately comes to mind is thinking about connective tissue, like literally as like tissue in the body, um, or in like a body. I don't really like the term the body. That's a whole other thing. But like yeah, connective tissue and like contact, which is a huge part of my work. and like literal contact and contact like opening up something that like wasn't there before, and like placing both like my body as the artist and the body of the reader, as I like to call them, or the participant, like connecting us, like connecting material to body, connecting body to material, connecting like material to material, um and yeah, thinking about the ways that like um that material, like the connective tissue in metal, like reflects the connective tissue of a body, and how bodies like dissolve and like are reformed in the same way that metal is, or textile, which is another like huge medium in my work, that like the way that bodies are like stitched together, or cut open. I mean, it's like even a very literal metaphor. Uh, yeah, and I feel like I think when I'm thinking about connection in my work, it's not conceptual because it's so personal that I'm honestly like, I sort of could care less if it if it like lands for you. But or for you as like the audience. But like materially, that like act of contact and connection is like, yeah, really essential.
We have a couple comments from the chat. Oh, and as well as a question that just popped through. So I loved the exploration of diaspora, identity, and family or community related issues in Genie and Essence's artworks. I felt your presentations were poetic. Particularly when I heard Genie's presentation, I felt as if I could visualize or see Vietnam. Followed by a question here. I have a few questions for Genie. When you address identity related issues artwork, do you find yourself negotiating and renegotiating identity? I find that as a complex process for those of us who are part of the diaspora communities. How does collage help? How does collage work help to address or explain these kind of complexities?
Thank you to the person online. Shout out. Well, I think collage is so pivotal, at least for me, in talking about identities and the like multiplicity of it all. Because when I'm working with a singular image or a something that is from my again, like from the background of like design and then illustration, where communications need to be clear and everything needs to be understandable, and the point is to communicate. And so when I am approaching collage, I feel like I can allow myself to gather materials from my own heritage and my personal relationships, the history of the Vietnam War that is very integral to our family dynamics, to kind of like the current landscape that is in America, because both of those exist in me now. And through collage, I can like uh, put them on top of one another. I can peel one off and review the other one underneath. And so it's literally this process of me constantly like, um, forcing them to be on the same plane so they can exist together. And therefore, like, I feel like my art making create this space where I feel like both sides of me can exist here. If I don't feel belong somewhere else, at least in this piece of work, that memory is there alongside with this one, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think we're almost at time. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. If you have any questions for individual artists or want to converse, please feel free to hang around a little bit and grab a cookie and some chips. But again, their exhibition will open in December, so please come back to see their work then. And thank you.